Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Coco Bandicoot here, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos once again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Klonoa Phantasy Reverie series, while we're still playing through Klonoa Daughter Phantomile for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X/S, PC Steam, and of course the Nintendo Switch. So, last time, we've essentially managed able to completely done with the films of not only Vision 5-1, but also with Vision 5-2 as well. So generally speaking, I was about the fact that we did somehow manage to beat the likes of Joker in the process as well, so everything else will be come to expect. So today, for this video, is about the fact that we're going to be continuing things on in Klonoa Daughter Phantomile, and because of that, we are now able to explore into Vision 6-1, and eventually 6-2 as well. So generally speaking, I was about the fact that, like I said before, these next two levels coming up, specifically Vision 6-1 as well as Vision 6-2, those levels are going to be very lengthy, mainly because you have to deal with the amount of backtracking, and as a result, no matter what though, I believe in Vision 6-1 that we have to able to go for a serious amount of rooms, and then exponentially we need to get rid of those specific colorful objects in order able to progress. So yeah, that's our main objective for this point. So, and exponentially speaking, I was about the fact that we've only got, well, technically speaking, I was about the fact that we've only just got about exactly 4 levels to go until we've basically done everything in Klonoa Daughter Phantomile up to that point, before we move on to Klonoa 2, Lunity's Veil. So I'm seriously still pretty excited about the forms of going back onto Klonoa 2 again, except this time in gorgeous HD, but at the same time though, it's about the fact that, well, you probably get the idea of what to expect. So, anyways though, a few things we want to explain for this point today is that today's date, of course, is the 29th of February today, in some cases in 2024 today. So in this case, welcome to the Leap Day, everybody, especially concerning for the fact that it's been a very long time since we actually stumbled across into a Leap Day, ever since in 2020, or if I like to call it, the most abomination year we've ever experienced, and at the same time though, with the forms of 2016, an alright year for the most part, and that could be also applies for 2012, in some cases the most black sheep in terms of the forms of the Maxi Toys community, despite the fact that back then it was actually horribly executed at first glance, mainly because according to what Sonic did somehow tell me something, that while looking back in 2012 though, it was not the best experience overall, but hey, at least that's something where we're going to able to mention about that specific year in mind. So anyways though, so yeah, there are some tons of things we'd like to point things out, potentially speaking of, is that first of all, recently Maxi has went back onto Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 recently, and as a result he's now tackling through Shadow Story. So as a result, expecting to believe about the fact that Shadow Story is going to be twice as lengthy compared to the forms of how it does in Sonic Story, just because there are quite a lot of areas that we have to do a lot of emphasis on combat, and same plus we have to deal with the majority of the enemies most of the time, and not to mention though is about the fact that we have to take care of the forms of a lot of stuff, which as a result, I'm sure about the fact that Maxi will mention more about it if he decides to able to go back on to Sonic 06 in Shadow Story and join at some point until tomorrow. And speaking of tomorrow though, about the fact that we're going to be approaching on to March tomorrow, because as a result, no matter what though, is about the fact that generally speaking though, is about the fact that I think relatively speaking also, that I believe we've only just got about exactly at least specifically the UK version specifically, that as a result we've only got about exactly 4 weeks left until Kung Fu Panda 4 will be releasing on the cinemas on the UK. And compared to the forms of how it does on the American version, well, suffice to say, they've only got 8 more days to go until Kung Fu Panda 4 is going to be releasing around that time as well. So either way though, that's going to be pretty exciting, especially because, you know, it's been, 8 years ago since the third film came out in 2016, so I could expect for the fact that I was pretty much hyped about the films of Kung Fu Panda 4 once that particular film comes out. So And I don't suppose if you noticed about the fact that there's also another thing I want to mention about in regards of the forms of what is going on just recently, aside from the fact that we actually got ourselves some bit of cool, although I will admit though right away, is about the fact that there is this particular thing has been going on so far that someone said in the comments down below. Ever since in our playthrough of Mario vs. Donkey Kong on the Switch remake, they somehow heard about the fact that, well, they've heard that Disney has made a deal with Sony Pictures Home Entertainment, and this will affect their future home media releases because their physical format is now under distribution of Sony Picture Home Entertainment, and Disney logos will still be present, but the Sony Pictures Home Entertainment logo will be credited in the packaging. So because of that though, yeah, it feels like future has changed after all, especially concerning for the fact that it might be something to do with like money business or something, or I can't really tell exactly for sure really, because I know for a fact it's been a very long time since I actually purchased something relates to Disney DVD stuff, ever since Enduring Films have been, let's just say, back in 2022 sometime, despite the fact that I no longer have Lightyear anymore, just because that film is so generic and boring, and as a result, that particular film really just somehow suffers the forms of box office failure, or specifically, box office bombed, to be more specifically, because as a result, no matter what though, a lot of controversies out there in regards to the forms of not only for its existence of a lesbian types, and not only that though, is about the fact that the story feels a bit convoluted because it involves around time traveling aspect. I mean, that's just really messed up. So either way, enough about that particular rant about the forms of that particular film, by the way. There's also another thing I would like to classify for mentioning something, that recently, as it turns out, it is about the fact that there's another game that's going to be coming out on the Nintendo Switch, and that's what appears to be Stumble Guys. Stumble Guys is basically the equivalent to Fall Guys, except the fact that obviously you're able to take control of actual people rather than just, you know, weird characters on screen. So generally speaking, it's about the fact that, yeah, from what I've heard, is basically it's kind of like Fall Guys, except you're able to take control of human characters. So that's always something, I suppose. So anyway, oh yeah, speaking of which though, is about the fact that I was quite shockingly surprised about the fact that not only did I forgot to mention about this, or should I say that the other toys, specifically Mario and Sonic and Pac-Man and Mega Man in general, that basically they totally forgot to mention about, that recently in Japan, that, well, suffice to say, happy 13th anniversary of the actual system's release of the Nintendo 3DS. Specifically, the original model of the Nintendo 3DS, you know, with the forms of this awkward stylus at the back, and on top of that with the forms of this dreaded battery life, and also with the forms that particular comfortable factor doesn't age very well nowadays. Well, mind you, because of how the fact that a lot of people seem to do prefer the comfortable factor, not just by the forms of the Nintendo 2DS, but also with the new 3DS XL, because obviously with that particular curves is really comfortable in the palm of your hands. So that's as far as I was expecting for this point. So anyways, let's go and activate the checkpoint right there, just in case we don't lose any of those specific progressions at this point. So anyways though, yeah, that's something I suppose. So also, as it turns out, is about the fact that we actually got ourselves some tons of announcements they did somehow brings us into for the most recent Pokemon Presents, and I will admit though right away, it was also disappointing. Well, mainly because of multiple factors. For one, there's only one new game has been announced recently, which I'm quite proud of, but at the same time, it's about the fact that we're really hoping about the fact that they'll bring in one last remake Pokemon game onto the Nintendo Switch before they moved on to Nintendo Switch 2, but as it turns out, it's about the fact that, well, I'll explain more details about that once we're able to mention about that specific topic. So, anywho though, something worth noting for as well is that apparently though, that what I've found out is that recently Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has recently came out today for the PlayStation 5. So as a result, and from what I've heard for several reviews out there, despite the fact that I'm not going to spoil things too much, they received the score really dang well. Like perfect out of 10, well 10 out of 10 I should say, and some occasional 9 out of 10s, and usually relatively speaking that everyone else seems able to give that particular Final Fantasy VII Rebirth a perfect 10 out of 10, which as a result, good thing we somehow predicted that ever since and during the Informs on Tuesday on somewhat, because obviously we've already somehow managed to keep on mentioning this multiple times, so I'm sure enough that was about the fact that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will definitely deserve the Game of the Year award in 2024. If that happens, that's the thing, because obviously we've only just got about 10 months time up to that point for that the Game of the Year awards, or the Game Awards in general, despite the fact that, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that, well, we've only got little amount of announcements back in June Informs have been last year, in about 2 months ago in 2023, besides with the forms of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, despite the fact that it's going to be only existence on next generation of systems for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X/S, and maybe PC as well, if you want to expect to include that. But either way, so with that being said, it looks like we are almost nearly at the end of this particular stage, basically, because as a result, after all, we've already got all of those pieces of the citizens right now, so we can pretty much expect able to do some pure platforming-esque, so... And still, I really love the music in the background. It almost feels a bit more atmospheric and stuff like that. So, as a result, there's nothing else I can really say about the Forms of Vision 6-1 in general, because obviously we have to go through a serious amount of those backtracking moments every time whenever you do manage to get rid of those specific statues, as you can definitely tell from the start, because obviously certain statues will block your progression. So, now as it turns out, it's about the fact that after activating that last checkpoint, and as a result, we can probably do some more climbing, platforming, and I somehow messed it up, so whoops. But that's okay though, because thankfully the actual the distance right there, or the actual length of this particular part, doesn't feel that lengthy though, which I've always appreciated about. But either way, I know it's been about 2 days ago since I actually have last played this game for sure, just because no matter what though, it's about the fact I was very pleased to know about the fact that we've almost finishing up Klonoa Daughter Phantomile for the 3rd time, for our channel anyway, so anyways, once we're able to activate this particular lift, just like the forms of how it does it on Vision 5-1, well, the vision is done. So, anyways though, there's also another thing I want to mention about in regards to the forms of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. As it turns out, when it comes to the forms of the gigabyte storage they do have, as a result, it did somehow contain 145.7 gigabytes if you really want to play that game on the PlayStation 5. So yeah, as a result, Rebirth is around 3 times the size of your average 50 gigabyte game. So yeah, that does seem quite a lot, and the size might also decide able to become a lot more. Well, I don't know about you, it's been a quite a long while since I actually have last mentioned something related to the forms of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but I'm sure enough that was about the fact that a lot of players out there are going to be pretty excited able to try out their game for reals after playing through that particular demo, and I'm sure enough that was about the fact that they'll enjoy it a lot. So now it just gives us a bit of time just before maybe some other Nintendo Switch games might get revealed at some point, but we shall see what happens, especially concerning for the fact that at this point in time, that like what Maxi has already mentioned about this before, myself included, that since that Pokemon Presents is now a thing after all, since about 2 days ago, so as a result, all he needs left now is just the, well, ND World, and during at some point, maybe in March, sometime in March, and exponentially we'll also get ourselves maybe the final General Direct when they focused on Switch-focused stuff before they moved on to a next system or something. But then again, time will tell, especially concerning for the fact that, I will admit though right away, most people complain about the forms of the lack of software releases during the forms of the second half of 2024 so far, because all we do know right from the start though is that we've already already know about the forms of the majority of some software will be releasing on the first half of the year. Like, for instance, we've already got Another Code Recollection, and on top of that, Mario vs. Donkey Kong Remake, which we've already know about that. And eventually at some point, maybe around 22 days time, that we'll get Princess Peach Showtime, so that's always going to be a thing for I was looking forward to. And on top of that, with the forms of Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble, and that is basically all there is to really say about this, I have to be honest for this point. Oh yeah, aside from the forms of Endless Ocean Luminous, but that's about it basically for the first half of the year, so that's as far as I was pretty much expecting. So, oh yeah, speaking of which though, let's get into the forms of specific announcements they do bring for the most recent Pokemon Presents just recently. First of all, they did somehow bring some more tier raid battles, but this time what appears to be by the forms of, well, some of these evolved Pokemon based off from, well, it's kind of hard to say honestly, although I wasn't really into Pokemon as much as the next guy, but I do know for the fact that, well, obviously when it comes to certain Pokemon they were able to bring on the raid battles, which there are a mighty Venusaur, a mighty Blastoise, and finally a mighty Charizard. And as a result, they are all coming onto the forms of the raid battle in Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet. So, yeah, for those of you interested with this kind of stuff though, more power to you. So, and there's also another thing they somehow mentioned about, is that we're getting some more information about the forms of, or should I say, not only more information, but also the actual news update for Pokemon Go, and this time they're about to be doing a collaboration with the forms of the animated series of all things this time around, which is obviously Pokemon Go crossed with Pokemon Horizons the series, which technically speaking though, as we've already said this before, ever since in the past few weeks ago, is that generally speaking though, for those of you who lived in the UK, they obviously already seen certain episodes in Pokemon Horizons the series, all thanks to the forms of the BBC iPlayer and stuff like that, whilst unlike the American version has to wait until specifically in the next couple of days time. I would say it's about to be up during at some point until next week sometime, so exponentially speaking though, it's going to be on Netflix, that's for sure. So just like the forms of how it does it in well, let's just say the majority of some Pokemon movies nowadays, which is Mewtwo Strikes Back, Evolution, and on top of that, Secrets of the Jungle. Speaking of which though, it's pretty lame about the fact that we're never actually going to get ourselves our new Pokemon movie for the time being, because no matter what though, I just have nothing more to say about that, I guess. So, but at least it's pretty cool about the fact that Pokemon Go is actually having a collaboration event, which at this point I think is about to start at some point on the 5th of March, on Tuesday specifically. So that's going to be roughly about 5 days time now, all the way to Monday the 11th of March. So yeah, for those of you who want to be more interested with that stuff, then by all means. And also they've mentioned about the forms of some more information about the forms of Pokemon Sleep. Like, I have nothing more else to say about that, apart from the fact you get yourself some nifty rewards for logging in, like for instance with 10 Poke Biscuits and 1,000 Diamonds, and generally speaking though, I got nothing more else to say about that particular game. And also they've mentioned more information about the forms of Pokemon Masters EX, which is pretty self-explanatory, and also they mentioned something more about the forms of Pokemon Cafe Remix, and yeah, nothing special from there. And also Pokemon Unite, which is nothing right to home about. And exponentially, out of nowhere, we're about to be getting yet another Pokemon phone game, but this time what it appears to be involves around in Pokemon trading card game. So yeah, that seems kind of interesting. Especially, they referring the actual title of the game is going to call it Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket, because obviously you're able to take a actual phone with you and put it into your pocket every time when you travel somewhere. So yeah, that's always something, I suppose. And they did somehow confirm to be released and during at some point in this year, in 2024. So I guess it's that. And finally, the actual, the exciting part, in terms of the Forms of Pokemon Presents just recently, as it turns out, do you guys even remember back in Journey Forms Within 2021 marks the 25th anniversary of the Pokemon franchise, when they first announced Pokemon Legends Arceus for the Nintendo Switch, which eventually did release in June at some point in 2022, and it did somehow become well received, not only for its reviews, but also with the actual sales units. So as a result, yeah, it's very impressive. As it turns out, we're about to be getting yet another Pokemon Legends game, except this time it's going to take place in a different region, specifically Generation 6, because want to know why it's Generation 6 as opposed to Generation 5? Well, as a result, they're going to be referring to call it Pokemon Legends Z-A. So, I have no idea what that's about exactly, but I do know from the start though is about the fact that it's going to take place in Journey Forms of some time in Generation 6, basically, because after all, we've already got Pokemon X and Y on the 3DS, so it seems pretty cool about the fact that now we've actually got a letter Z on the actual specific upcoming Pokemon title. And as a result, it's going to be coming out on the Nintendo Switch, and you never believe what the release date is going to be releasing on for that particular time. It's going to be releasing until 2025, and I was like, what the hell, man? I mean, sure enough though, about the fact that, well, I just have nothing else to say about the phone's specific release date. I'm guessing it's kind of like the similar situation as the forms of 2021 Pokemon Presents back then, because as a result, they did state about the fact that Legends Arceus did somehow is going to be releasing at some point in 2022. So now about the fact that with the next Pokemon Legends game, it's now going to be confirmed to be released until 2025. So, and speaking of 2025 though, as far as I did somehow found out, that as it turns out, in regards to the forms of the next couple of Switch games later down the road, it seems to be more specifically is about the fact that they were expecting to believe that, well, when does the actual Nintendo Switch will be discontinued. I think for its part is that Nintendo has been confirmed it will continue to support the Switch with new games through to the end until sometime in March in 2025. So yeah, that's quite bonkers, all things considered. Well, I do somehow manage to able to found this out anyway. And in fact, no matter what though, is about the fact that someone in the article, back in Journey Forms of some time ago in 2023, that basically Nintendo President, I do apologize for that mispronunciation of his specific name by the way, Shintaro Kurono, I think is what it says anyway. Again, I apologize if I botched this particular name by the way. Says that Switch games will continue to be released until March 2025. So, yeah, that could be even more possibilities that we might able to actually see some more unannounced Nintendo Switch games. Well, then again, we'll have to wait and see what happens later down the road. Just because no matter what though, at the end of the day, I feel like that the Pokemon Presents presentation is not that great in my opinion. I mean, the biggest highlight for us though is of course the existence of Pokemon Legends Z -A, because no matter what though is about the fact, I'm pretty sure a lot of Pokemon fans out there will be pretty excited about the forms of this next installment of the Pokemon Legends series after the events of, you know, 2022's Pokemon Legends Arceus. So yeah, everything else will be come to expect. Now, what I found out as well about the fact that obviously it's going to take place in Journey Forms of Generation 6. So obviously, no matter what though, is about the fact that it feels like no matter what though, we're going back onto Lumberous City, at least as far as I'm usually concerned. And guess what? We got ourselves the grand return of the forms of Mega Evolutions. So yeah, that seems pretty cool and all that stuff, because the last time they somehow utilized the forms of Mega Evolutions was back in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon for the Nintendo 3DS, because unlike in Sword and Shield, as well as Scarlet and Violet, did somehow ditch that particular Mega Evolution system, which that caused a lot of like fan services gets all pure chaos for that particular absence. So yeah, I guess there's nothing else to say about that, I guess. So, but at least it's pretty cool about the fact that we can finally get a chance to see Mega Evolutions again, but this time in gorgeous HD visuals for the time being. So generally speaking though, I'm sure that Pokemon fans will be pretty much happy about that, ourselves included. So exponentially speaking though, I'm not exactly sure if I was trying to get it in day one, once that game decides to come out, because I'm still waiting for the next couple of unannounced Nintendo Switch games might potentially try to get announced at some point, because we still have no idea when does not only Luigi's Mansion 2 HD gets its release date just yet, along with Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door for the Nintendo Switch as a remake. But then again, we'll have to wait and see. So because of that though, and as you can tell, this will be the final time we're going to be able to start rescuing certain citizens, if you couldn't tell, during the forms of Klonoa Daughter Phantomile as a game itself. Because exponentially, once we move on to Klonoa 2 Lunatic's Veil, then obviously we have to rescue specific dolls. So exponentially, that's as far as we can able to try to focus on once we get on to Klonoa 2 Lunatic's Veil. So anyways though, there's also another thing I want to mention about this as well, is that what I found out, that recently we've actually got ourselves some cool new articles that I did somehow found out just recently, all thanks to the forms of, well, before I mention more about those, basically, as it turns out, despite the fact I decided able to take a break on playing Sonic Dash for a while, until God knows if they decide to able to bring up the next playable character during that time, well, as it turns out, I'm actually onto the halfway point when it comes to unlocking Chrono Silver, because as a result, that was another one of those specific epic category of characters that I haven't exactly unlocked yet, next to Mummy Knuckles, because the forms list restricted, or in some cases a very stingy obtaining the character card system, because obviously I just found this to be a little bit more tedious, and on top of that, a little bit more luck based at times if you desperately want to unlock that specific character. So yeah, as it turns out that I somehow, so far anyway, I somehow managed able to get myself a grand total of 50 Chrono Silver character cards so far, so naturally I'm on to the halfway point when it comes to unlocking him. So yeah, it doesn't take that long. I think the reason why that I somehow got more of those Chrono Silver character cards recently, mainly because of multiple factors. Sometimes it randomly pops up in journey forms of specific runs, and there are a few rare occasional moments when I somehow managed to get 10 cards in journey forms of trying to pull off specific quick time event tricks. So that's always pretty swell, especially considering for the fact that hopefully by that time until later on, well, for the majority of 2024 I should say, hopefully I should able to guarantee to able to unlock Chrono Silver alongside with Mummy Knuckles eventually, because no matter what though, I'm pretty sure we've almost done when it comes to unlocking the majority of those playable characters in Sonic Dash, because I'm pretty sure about the fact that Sonic Dash 2, or in some cases Sonic Boom, Sonic Dash 2, is basically done in content, because as a result, we were expecting to able to have Metal Sonic as a playable character, but guess what? It never happens. And because of that though, yeah, I can totally see why it's about the fact that it's been about, let's just say it's been almost like 7 years ago since we've last seen something related to Sonic Boom, since the end of the second season, despite the fact that both Orbot and Cubot were expecting that the next season will be on its way, but it never happened, mainly because as a result, Sonic Boom has been erased from its existence for the sake of continuity, well, despite the fact that in Journey forms of the ending cutscene in Sonic Frontiers, that Amy did somehow mention Styx the Badger twice, not only in the main game, but also on the Final Horizons DLC, despite the fact that that particular ending cutscene feels very identical when it comes to, like, depending on what specific thing you go into, aside from the fact that they obviously bringing a different music in the background, so that's the only thing that usually changes for that particular point, so... But anyway, so before we get on to more details about the forms of what's going on in Journey forms of not only in the UK coming up, but also about the fact that for everywhere else as well, is that there's technically another game is going to be on its way, and join at some point in April sometime in this year, which as it turns out, it appears to be by the forms of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Arcade Wrath of the Mutants. So as a result, it's going to be releasing at some point on the 23rd of April in 2024. Not only is it going to be releasing on Nintendo Switch, but also on PC Steam, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and Xbox One or Xbox Series X or something. Well, then again though, it's been quite some time since we've mentioned something related to the game developer called Game Mill Entertainment, because obviously the last time we mentioned something like this, it was actually thanks to the forms of, you know, with this recent DreamWorks kart racing game recently, so... But I digress. So, there's also another thing I want to mention about this, is about the fact that I've noticed about the fact that with the full article for that particular upcoming Knuckles the series on Paramount Plus, for each and every single episode in Journey Forms of Knuckles the series coming up, I believe the actual runtime for each and every single episode will last for about 1 hour each. So as a result, it'll make us a grand total of 6 hours we have to get through just before the events of Sonic the Hedgehog 3. So yeah, that might be something worth to keep an eye on for. Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens during at some point until by the end of April. So that's besides the point. So anyway though, speaking of Sonic the Hedgehog 3, as far as I've noticed something, is that I've noticed about the fact that they've also addressed something about the fact that the actual film coming up, the film will draw inspiration from the video games, not just by the forms of Sonic Adventure 2, but also Shadow the Hedgehog as well. So it's like a huge connection between the forms of, well, it's hard to say really, because I know for a fact that the film hasn't exactly been released yet, because obviously we still only got about 10 months for now until that particular film will be releasing. So, although then again, I apologize for my commentary, it's a little bit slightly slippy sometimes, but that's just mainly because that's as far as we can able to mention about in regards to the forms of what is going on during the forms of not only in Pokemon Presents recently, which I did somehow manage to find out about the fact that it was not that great in my opinion. I mean, the greatest highlight still is obviously Pokemon Legends Z through A, so as a result that'll be pretty exciting, especially considering for the fact that maybe they'll able to catch even more Pokemon, but this time we're going back onto Generation 6, so that should be pretty exciting. So because of that, I honestly have no idea why they somehow skipped over Generation 5 all of a sudden. Like, it feels like the exact same situation as the forms of the most recent Mario Luigi RPG games, specifically the remakes department. Like, for instance, that we've already got Superstar Soccer as a remake on the 3DS in 2017, but until 2 years later, or technically 1 year later for those of you who lived in Japan, that we're able to expect to have Mario Luigi Bowser's Inside Story as a remake on the 3DS rather than Partners in Time. So I honestly have no idea why it feels like the exact same situation as of right now. That's as we mentioned this before, we've got, you know, Pokemon Legends Arceus in Journey Forms of in 2022, and in 2025 we're able to expect to see Pokemon Legends Z-A. So it almost feels like a reverse kind of alphabetical kind of order or something. Well, then again, we'll just expect to find out more details about the forms of that particular upcoming Pokemon game during at some point in 2025. I don't think it's possible that the next main Pokemon game will be releasing anytime soon, just because, you know, we've already got, you know, the most recent generation, which is of course Generation 9, which brings us to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So my guess is about the fact that maybe the 10th generation might be expected to be released at some point in 2026, specifically for the next Nintendo system eventually. So, but then again, our expectations might be a little bit low at this point, but either way though, we'll have to wait and find out in Journey at some point in 2026, so, which is roughly around the same time as when maybe Toy Story 5 will be expected to be in existence, so. But either way, looks like everyone else has arrived just in time, just before we've realized about the fact that if you think that the day is saved, well, as it turns out, we're still not done yet, because after all, we've actually completed Vision 6-2. So because of that, despite the fact I did somehow manage able to make several mistakes sometimes, although, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that we've only just got about 2 levels to go, which there are Final Vision and approximately Extra Vision eventually. So yeah, it might take a bit of some time to able to get to that point. So yeah, it looks like he was trying to able to summoning something. So yeah, that's just what I was going to be able to expect to say something like this. So anyways though, there's also probably the final thing I want to mention about is that in Journey Phones within the UK sometime, that as it turns out, we've actually got ourselves the actual confirmation of the specific release date of the new banknotes will be existent. Specifically, King Charles III banknotes, and it's going to be entering circulation until the 5th of June in 2024. So that's going to be roughly about 9 days before, let's just say, Inside Out 2 will be releasing at some form or another. So yeah, that's as far as I can say about that. So yeah, not much else I can say. I do apologize for my commentary, it's a bit slightly bare bones in Journey Forms of some parts, but that's just mainly because no matter what though, we've already explained well enough as it is, especially noticeable with the forms of the most recent Pokemon Presents event, and yeah, all needs left now, as we said this before. Next up might be potentially be ND World, because obviously ND World always takes place in Journey Forms event sometime in every single March in Journey Forms of some years. So yeah, that's as far as I was expecting. And no matter what though, is about the fact that we're really hoping that we'll get ourselves the last few bits of information about the forms of Shantae Advance, Risky's, Revelation and stuff like that, so I can able to finally get a chance to play that particular Lost Media Shantae game, but this time on this glorious Nintendo Switch. Although, truth be told though, they did somehow recently confirmed the limited game run or limited run kind of physical version already for the Game Boy Advance cartridge version. Although I highly doubt, I don't know if I can able to get that version specifically, because no matter what though, I'm still basically trying to able to get certain Shantae games digitally, which we've already done that ever since in Journey at some point, probably in 2022 sometime, because no matter what though, is about the fact that I very appreciate I can finally get a chance to get a full experience on playing certain Shantae games. So also, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that Hupo does kind of remind me of a deformed Chow, almost. I don't know, it's probably just me, because it almost kind of reminds me of Chow from the Sonic the Hedgehog games. So but either way, it looks like that this mysterious monster called Natatube has been unleashed, so we're not able to stop him no matter what before it's too late. So, and that will pretty much lead us to, presumably speaking, the final boss in Klonoa Daughter Phantomile. So yeah, nothing else to say about this. So, and as a result, we have rescued every single citizens in each and every single level. So because of that, and it looks like this particular rainbow kind of road has been appeared. So this pretty much leads us to the grand finale, which as a result, specifically for Klonoa Daughter Phantomile on Phantasy Reverie series. So, and then once we get to Klonoa 2 Lunity's Veil though, as you probably already expect, ever since on the original PlayStation 2 version, that the entire experience on Klonoa 2 will be expected to become a lot more longer, because obviously with the forms of specifically lengthy levels, and on top of that, there's going to be a lot of trial and error involved when it comes to getting that specific collectibles. So, anyway, with that being said, folks, is that we got the endings of this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Klonoa Phantasy Reverie series, while we're playing through Klonoa Daughter Phantomile. Is that we're going to be going into the final vision, which we're going to take on the final boss in Klonoa Daughter Phantomile. So I'll see you guys until on Tuesday. Later, fellas.